So we have an exclusive tonight with Harvey Weinstein's defense team. Their client tonight is in Rikers Island, facing up to 25 years in prison after his conviction on 2 of the 5 counts that he was charged with of sexual assault. They say that he took it like a man and that this is not over. According to his attorney, the man who controlled Hollywood for nearly 30 years and won 81 Oscars said this upon hearing the verdict: "I am innocent. How could this happen in America?" was his response. Weinstein was acquitted on the most serious charges that were against him, but after weeks of excruciating testimony from these women, the jury found him guilty on 1 count of criminal sexual act and 1 count of rape in the 3rd degree, a verdict that will be remembered as a watershed moment for the Me Too movement.
These are 8 women who pulled our justice system into the 21st century by declaring that rape is rape and sexual assault is sexual assault no matter what.
As the prosecution, Cy Vance today. Here now 2 members of Harvey Weinstein's defense team, Donna Rotunno and Damon Cheronis. Welcome. Great to have both of you here. Welcome back, Donna. Good to see you today, Damon. So, Donna, were you surprised?
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
Why?
I think the evidence just didn't support a guilty finding on any counts. I think that the jury was in a position where they looked at a verdict sheet of 5 counts and felt that they couldn't walk out of there and convict him of nothing.
Interesting. Damon, as you listened to the questions come back from the jury,
Sure.
How did you read what they wanted to look at again? Because everybody, of course, read the tea leaves. And I think the feeling a lot of people had over the weekend, who I heard talking about the case, they said, oh, he's going to get off. Did you feel that way?
Well, questions are always the worst part of deliberations because you want the jury to just come back and not have to deal with that. When they came back with the last question regarding sort of the deadlock, potential deadlock, we were a little confused because of how the jury instructions were written. There was a way to read it poorly for us and a way to have hope, so we were kind of stuck in the middle. But the instructions were a little complicated.
Was Harvey angry with you,
No.
with both of you?
No,
Not at all.
Harvey's never been angry with us at all. I think Harvey saw how hard we worked, and I think he was grateful. He expressed gratitude to us, and he was strong.
Was he shocked?
He was shocked. He was shocked. He was shocked because he knows he didn't rape anyone. And so he was shocked, and we don't believe that the evidence showed that he did.
Did you argue, Damon, for him to be allowed to go home and await his March 11 sentencing there? And why did the judge turn that down?
Sure, the judge remanded him into custody. We raised a number of his medical conditions as a reason why, and the fact that we don't believe is a flight risk. The judge didn't really give a reason as to why he was denying it. He said he agreed with us that Mr. Weinstein has some serious health conditions, and then he just remanded him into custody. So he didn't explain the reasoning, but he certainly denied our request.
What's your understanding of where he will be exactly and whether or not he'll have any medical care, Donna?
He will have medical care. We made a request. We have already heard tonight that that's being honored. He was being moved to an infirmary area of Rikers, but now we just heard before coming on that he was experiencing some high blood pressure and some heart palpitations. I think
That's
he's
not
okay.
surprising.
Right? No, it's not.
Obviously,
it's not.
and what I heard earlier today from Judge Napolitano, who was reaching out to some of his former colleagues who are still involved on the bench, and they said that this judge is very tough. This judge is a heavy sentencer, Damon.
Well, I have no experience with him, but I've heard that he does have heavy sentencing tendencies, but Mr. Weinstein has no criminal history. We're hoping he takes a lot of the mitigation that we're going to put forward into account and realizing that there's going to be other judges looking at this as well.
So how much do you think, Donna, you did cross-examination of these women. How much did emotion play into this for the jury? Because there were some very emotional moments up there. One of the witnesses broke down and everything had to be halted. How much do you think that impacted the jury?
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. And that was one of the things we were hoping that we could, kind of deal with in jury selection and say, we know that this is going to be emotional and we know that they're going to be asked hard questions. And can you set that aside and just look at the evidence? And, I think it's a tough task.
You have been criticized by a lot of women and of people out there. Here are some of the headlines that have been leveled at you through the course of this process. That you're the most dangerous thing to come out of Me Too. What kind of woman defends Harvey Weinstein? There's a special place in hell for Harvey Weinstein's lawyer. What do you say to that, Donna?
Well, I think those headlines say more about those writing them than they say about me. Those headlines do not take into account the fact that when you are charged with a crime, you have a right to due process. You have a right to the presumption of innocence. You have a right to say evidence should be something that we look at in terms of determining whether or not someone is innocent or guilty. And to attack me, I think not only attacks the justice system, and I was prepared for the attacks, but I was not prepared for the attacks on the system itself. So when people, one writer said that my defense was wretched and my questions were monstrous. And it's like, well, wait, did you think that we were going to walk into a courtroom and people were going to be able to make claims and then I wouldn't ask any questions of a witness? Of course, that's not going to happen. So I was more surprised about the attack on our system of justice than I really am about the attacks on me.
So when I interviewed you prior to this, you said that you believe that he's innocent of these charges. That goes beyond just saying, I believe everyone deserves a defense, which I think everybody can understand. But when people hear some of these stories, some of them are surprised that you say that you believe that Harvey Weinstein, who 80 women have accused of all varieties of assault, all the way up to rape, is innocent. Do you still believe that?
Well, I believe that he's innocent of the crimes that we were dealing with in our case itself. And there were, 2 different women making claims in our case. Of course, there were others that were used for other reasons. But in terms of what the jury was asked to find guilt or innocence on, I believe that Mr. Weinstein is innocent of those charges based on the evidence that I was able to review and deal with and, live with for the last 9 months.
Damon, Cy Vance came out and he said, rape, this proves that rape is rape, whether it happens in a dark alley or in an intimate relationship, that no matter what you do, if you call him, if you write him, if you email him afterwards, that it doesn't take away the possibility that in that moment, that was a non-consensual event and it was rape.
Sure, I don't think this case changes anything in that regard. I think every case has to be looked on its own merits, right? So the fact that individuals stay in contact or send emails. Our problem with this case was the type of contact, the type of emails, the type of loving responses that just to us did not add up to a non-consensual encounter. I don't think it's going to be a sea change in how these cases are tried or defended.
Donna, last question. Do you think that there is what are the grounds for appeal? You said you're going to appeal this case. What are the grounds?
Sure. Well, there are multiple. Obviously, there's an issue with one of the jurors and the information that she had prior to coming into the case, and whether or not we believe she could be fair and impartial. Was
that something you weren't aware of when she was chosen on the jury?
Well, we were made aware, and then we made inquiries about it, and it didn't remove her. Our questions didn't remove her, but we definitely think that could be a potential issue. There are issues with regard to evidentiary matters. There are issues with regard to the number of Molyneux witnesses, the fact that Annabella Shore was in the case. I mean, there are multiple issues that we're going to address.
We will be following it as it moves along. You said you're not sure whether or not you're going to handle the LA case. Is that true?
Correct.
All right. Well, keep us posted. Big day, obviously, after a lot of work for both of you and a split decision, but one that could leave Harvey Weinstein in prison for some time. Thank you both very much for being here tonight.